Good morning, everyone. My name is Richard Ponte, and I'm the Director of Events and Programs for the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of the entire team here, it is my pleasure to welcome you to HR Forum Update, the latest in our webinar series. Thank you for joining. Before we get going, there are just a few things we'd like to share with you about today's session. All participants are in listen-only mode. Please submit questions using the Q&A function. Time permitting, we will answer them by the end of our session. We will also use the Q&A feature to share useful links and other materials. We have enabled closed captioning in English. You can access this feature by toggling it on the taskbar at the bottom of your screen. This meeting is being recorded, and we will make the recording available to you on our website in the next few days. And finally, if you lose your connection, please use the same Zoom link to reconnect. We would now like to begin by thanking our sponsors. Our premier sponsor is Cross Insurance. Our program sponsor is Littler. Our 2026 webinar series sponsors are AARP, Central Maine Power Company, Kennebec Savings Bank, Key Bank, Next Era Energy Resources, and Northeast Delta Dental. And now, here is a word from premier sponsor Cross Insurance.
What is insurance?
Sure. Insurance transfers certain risks between parties.
Without insurance, the economy would really stop.
In simple terms, insurance is like community.
It's protecting every last asset that somebody has built over a lifetime.
You're in it together. You feel supported.
From the beginning to the end. What insurance is just taking care of people. It's definitely a way of life.
Many thanks to all of our sponsors this morning. It is now my pleasure to introduce Amanda Johnson of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. Amanda serves as the Government Relations Specialist and will be moderating the conversation today. Good morning, Amanda.
Good morning, and thank you, Richard, for that introduction, and thank you again to our sponsors. Welcome, everyone, to our 2026 Human Resources webinar. Today, we will be discussing Maine Paid Family and Medical Leave and Maine Earned Paid Leave, covering current requirements, recent updates, and key considerations employers need to know when managing these programs in the workplace. I would like to welcome our speakers today. First, the legal team from Littler Mendelson, who have graciously shared their expertise with us for another year. Melinda Caterine, Ellen McCann, and Stephen Siller. We are also pleased to have representatives from the Maine Department of Labor join us. Scott Cotnoir, Director of Wage and Hour Division, who will be discussing Earned Paid Leave, and Sarah Brydon, Claims Administration Division Director for the Paid Family and Medical Leave Program. Thank you to all our speakers for being here today and for sharing their knowledge and expertise. With that, I will turn it over to Scott to begin our discussion on the Maine Earned Paid Leave. Good morning, Scott.
Scott, you're on mute.
Sorry about that, folks. Thank you for having me. I'm the Director of the Wage and Hour Division for the Maine Department of Labor. We're the enforcement division for Maine's Earned Paid Leave, for all of Maine's labor laws, which includes Maine's Earned Paid Leave statute, which is a relatively new statute. If you want to advance to the next slide, give you an overview of the law, the employers that are covered under it, and employees that are covered from this law. Next slide, please. All right, so the overview of the law. Maine's Earned Paid Leave is basically applies to employers that have more than 10 employees, and it's basically more than 10 employees for more than 120 days in a calendar year or a given year. The law requires employers to allow employees to accrue 1 hour of paid leave for every 40 hours worked. Accrual begins at the start of employment. There are restrictions that employers can put in place as to when employees are entitled to start using that leave. The leave, employees must be able to use the leave for basically any reason, emergencies, illness, sudden necessities, or even planned leave. The law does define, like I said, who's covered, employers that are covered, how earned leave is accrued, when it can be used, what happens to unused and accrued balances at year's end, gets into employers' responsibilities, what they're required to do, and I can get into key points about that law. If you want to advance to the next slide. One more. All right, so employers, the law actually uses a definition of employment, employer, and employee. The definition of employment and employer comes from Maine's unemployment tax law. Basically, it's going to, if you are an employer and you're subject to Maine's unemployment tax law, you're going to be a covered employer. There are exceptions for seasonal employers that operate less than 26 weeks in a year. They're not covered under this law, and state law isn't applicable to federal employees. The law doesn't apply to independent contractors. If you are an employer with more than 10 employees and the employment is defined, falls under unemployment tax law, you have to allow employees to accrue 1 hour of paid leave for every 40 hours worked. If you have an existing policy that meets that standard, this wouldn't necessarily be another bank of time. It can be integrated with existing policies. The law applies to salaried exempt employees, full-time employees, part-time employees, employees that are paid per diem. It even applies to minors. So if they work, if they're defined as an employee, the law is going to apply to them. When the law went into effect, there was an exception for collective bargaining agreements at the time that were in place at the time. So if you had a CBA that was in effect before 2021, they were exempt from falling under this statute until that CBA expires, and then any new CBA would need to comply with Maine's Earned Paid Leave law. If you want to advance to the next. I think this is Mindy.
Yes, it's me. Good morning. Hopefully, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, I've been having problems with my computer this morning, so I'm on my iPad. Not ideal, but we'll make it work. So Scott covered the accrual, the basic accrual formula, carryover and accrual. That's really the hot issue. Unused leave must carry over each year without reducing no accrual. And according to the statute, it allows up to double the capped leave balance. But I need to note that the MDOL interprets that as no caps on carryover or use, and Scott will discuss that in a little bit. The statute treats salaried and hourly employees equally when it comes to earned paid leave. Salaried workers are presumed to work 40 hours unless it's tracked otherwise. So if employers are actually tracking the hours of salaried employees, they may have to provide them with more paid leave. Most employers don't track that. Employers have to ensure accurate payroll and timekeeping. Otherwise, it'll be impossible to track accrual or use. If you could move to the next slide, probably next two slides. Okay, waiting period. The statute allows 120-day waiting period, but it's not required. You can waive that if an employer doesn't want to wait that long to provide somebody with their earned paid leave. Employees must be paid at least their base rate of pay immediately prior to the leave and receive comparable benefits when they're using paid leave. And I'm going to let Scott jump in and explain how the Maine DOL determines the base rate of pay for employees under this law.
Right. So the regulations define the base rate of pay as the regular rate. It's similar to the regular rate of pay as defined in Maine's minimum wage and overtime statute. And when an employee uses earned paid leave, employers should look at the week immediately prior to the leave being taken, determine what their rate of pay was for that particular week, and that's what they would need to pay the employee for the time that they're using. If you have an employee that has just one hourly rate of pay, or they have a single salary there as an exempt employee, you look back, whatever that hour for the hourly employee, whatever that rate of pay is, that's what you're going to be. That's the base rate of pay for that employee. The salaried employee, you convert the salary to an hourly rate, and then you pay the hourly that rate for the number of hours that they're using for their earned paid leave. It gets a little more nuanced when employees have multiple rates of pay. We'll take the service industry for an example. You have a number of different employees on the front end of the house that your bartender, your busser, your server, your host, who all may be making different rates of pay, paid a different rate, but they're being paid less than minimum wage, so they're using the tip credit. In that case, those employees, their rate of pay is actually minimum wage. So they would be paid the full minimum wage. You wouldn't pay a server that's getting $7.55 an hour direct wage plus tips. You wouldn't pay them $7.55 an hour for the time that they're using earned paid leave. They would get $15.10, the state's minimum wage. If you have employees that have more than one rate of pay in a given week, and it's more than minimum wage, you're going to do the weighted average. The total earnings they had, the total straight time earnings from the previous week divided by the total number of hours worked is going to give you the average rate of pay. That would be their base rate of pay. It can get more complicated if employees are receiving bonuses, commissions. Then you actually have to take, there's another calculation that needs to be done. And I could spend an hour just talking about that. But basically, you take the total earnings, straight time earnings from the previous week divided by the number of hours actually worked. That gives you the average rate of pay. That would be the base rate of pay.
So it's very complicated. Under the statute, employees must provide reasonable notice for leave, and employers can require scheduling of the leave to avoid undue hardship as reasonably determined by the employer. So it's really important to have a clear written policy in place that explains the periods of time during the year that it would likely create an undue hardship for an employer, like during a holiday season or during a busy tourist season. Can you move to the next slide, please? Excuse me. Accrued and unused EPL earned paid leave must carry over and be available for use the following year without reducing new accruals. Employers can use their existing PTO or vacation policies if they meet or exceed the statutory requirements, including the accrual and the carryover. And policies combining sick leave and vacation must allow use for any reason, just like earned paid leave, and allow accrual and carryover. But it's important to note that if you combine your sick leave and vacation policies, then you're going to need to pay that out upon termination of employment, just like you'd be required to pay accrued but unused vacation out upon termination of employment. But if you have a separate policy on earned paid leave, you can actually say in your handbook that you do not pay out accrued but unused earned paid leave upon termination of employment. The MDOL guidance states that accrual use caps are not permitted, requiring careful policy review to avoid large leave balance issues. So what can you do to avoid these large balance issues? You can require that your earned paid leave run concurrently with things like FMLA. You can determine as a company not to offer additional forms of paid leave. You can also offer cash out of accrued but unused earned paid leave at year end, but you can't require employees to take the cash out. Can you move to the next slide, please? Employees are required to give reasonable notice for foreseeable leave, and also to notify employers promptly if they have a sudden emergency or need for a leave. Employers can require scheduled leave to avoid undue hardship, and this helps to balance staffing and peak periods. The Maine DOL enforces the earned paid leave law, which I'm sure we all know by now. And so employers need to have clear policies and documentation to avoid violations. And this is another very important reason to have accurate payroll and timekeeping systems so that you can avoid violations and penalties. Next slide. I'm going to turn it back to Scott.
All right, some key points and guidance. So we do provide interpretive guidance on unpaid leave, reflecting how we are going to approach enforcement and outreach and education. The accrual and carryover rules, again, employees, the floor, the base is employees need to be able to accrue 1 hour of paid leave for every 40 hours worked. Our interpretation of the statutory change that went into effect last year is that the unused and accrued leave would be required to carry, employees would be required to carry that over into the following year, and that's not going to have any effect on what they can accrue in the new year. If an employee didn't use any of their time, they accrued 40 hours, that rolls over into the new year. They have that 40 hours available to them to use. They then would also accrue additional time through the year. Employees must be able to use the leave for any reason. Emergency, illness, or sudden necessity requires, the employer can require employees to give notice as soon as practicable when using it for that purpose. Planned leave, employers can have a policy that requires employees to give up to 4 weeks advance notice for planned leave, such as vacation time. I can't stress enough that it's in the employer's best interest to establish an earned paid leave policy. Within that policy, they should have something that addresses the annual cap the annual accrual to whatever the number is. Without that, if you have paid time off policies and not an earned paid leave policy, whatever your cap is on those other paid is going to be applicable to Maine's earned paid leave. The employers can establish minimum increments for use. Can't be more than 1 hour. So if an employee called in saying, I had an emergency, I'm going to be 15 minutes late, you can require the employee to use 1 hour of unpaid leave for that reason. It just can't be more than 1 hour as a requirement. Providing notice, again, the policy should state that employees need to give X amount of advance notice for planned leave, put that in the policy, and who they actually should notify. What happens to the unaccrued balance? You can have a policy, as Mindy stated, that allows employees to cash out the balance, either on a yearly basis or at the end of employment. You just can't require employees cash out that balance at the end of every year. When employees leave employment, what happens to the balance? Put in your EPL policy if there is a cash value to it. You can say there is no cash value to earned paid leave when they leave. But absent that, if you do have paid leave policy and it does provide payout at the end of the year, it's going to mirror that policy. If you move to the next slide. How we apply the law. We get complaints. We'll talk with the employer. We'll find out what their policy is. We'll review that. If an employer doesn't have an earned paid leave policy and they're using their existing paid time off policy as the standard, we will look at, does it meet the minimum of 1 hour for every 40 hours work that they have accrued? Are they able to use that time for any reason? If all you offer is sick time, the employee must be able to use that for emergency, illness, necessity, or even planned leave. We touched on, Manny touched on salaried exempt employees. The presumption is they paid a salary. The presumption is they work, it's for 40 hours. If you actually have salaried employees and state, look, this position is a minimum of 50 hours a week and you're expected to work 50 hours a week, that's the standard. So they'll be accruing 1 hour. Again, you accrue 1 hour for every 40 hours work, but they're going to accrue whatever. If you put a cap on the amount that they can accrue each year, they're going to accrue it sooner than somebody that's just working 40 hours. If you're not keeping time records on your exempt employees, we say it's the standard is 40 hours. They're presumed to work 40 hours. We have earned paid leave information on our website, and there should be a link that will be provided in the question and answer section of this Zoom meeting. It covers a lot of frequently asked questions. Because the law changed, our rules and guidance were no longer complied with the change in the law. So we actually had to change, update our guidance. The rules have not yet been updated, but we will be working on those in the coming weeks. This summer, fall, we should be putting that out to notice that the rules are going to be changed and give public comment and go through the standard process for that. Next slide. Is this back?
And one more slide, please. Okay. The statute allows accrual caps, but is silent on use limits. And the MDOL rules provide for up to a maximum of 40 hours available for use. And the MDOL has a different interpretation of this. And I think the MDOL's interpretation is contrary to the statute and the rules, but I'll let Scott explain that one.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that point of view. So we don't pass the laws. The legislature passes laws. We have to try to interpret the law based on the intent when it was passed. The new amendment did change. Employers were always required to allow employees to roll over unused earned paid leave before the amendment. What changed is, prior to the amendment, whatever was rolled over counts towards the amount that they could accrue in the new year. Now, our interpretation, because of the changes, it no longer counts towards the accrual they can, the amount that they can accrue in a given year. The law does have a statement in there that says the accrued and unused earned paid leave that rolls over from the previous year must be available for use by the employee in the along with the accrual. Again, that this is our interpretation. If they rolled over 40 and they accrued another 40, they must be able to. We're saying they must be able to use that 80 hours in that given year. And then again, if they don't use it, that amount rolls over into the next year, and it continues to build and can become a big liability for an employer. So having an earned paid leave policy, like I said, I can't stress that enough. Have a policy. Employers can't require employees to cash it out every year, but you can, an employer at their discretion can allow employees to cash it out, and it may be worth that for an employer to try to limit the liability that they have of high balances. All right. Front loading. Some employers will, when an employee gets hired, they say, we're giving you X amount upfront. We'll give you 40 hours of paid time off upfront that you can use through the year. If an employee uses all of their time within the first 6 months, as an example, but then leaves employment, what was front loaded, it should have covered for the whole year. The fact that they left 6 months early, but they used the full amount, an employer can prorate that accrual and actually recover half in that example from the employee's final pay. If an employee doesn't use any of the time or uses some of the time, whatever they don't use in that year will carry over to the next year. If the employer then front loads again, that's in addition to what was carried over. And just need to keep that in mind if you're considering front loading the time and what's going to happen if an employee uses time that they actually haven't accrued yet before they leave employment. Again, our rules and the statute no longer align in a couple areas, and our rules can't supersede statute. So we've got to bring our rules into alignment. And I said we will be opening those up to the rulemaking process here in the coming weeks. Again, there should be a link to our guidance on the website. Employers should be, I'm encouraging employers to reach out to the Maine Department of Labor with any questions you have. We'd rather answer questions than investigate complaints and have to take any type of enforcement action. And Mindy, is there another slide, or we?
There's one more slide.
Okay. And is this yours or mine?
That's yours.
Okay.
Well, either one of us can do it, but.
Oh, okay. So I touched on this rules amendments and areas of ongoing uncertainty. Yes, there is. We may not see.
There's a best practices slide that we haven't gotten to.
Is that the next one?
That's the next one.
Okay. All right. Because the law change that went into effect in 2025, as I stated, the statute and rules and guidance weren't in alignment. We've updated the guidance on the website. The rules are getting updated. There is uncertainty as how EPL integrates with combined banks when employers have a unlimited PTO. How much should apply to earned paid leave? If you don't specify in your policy that you can accrue a specific amount of earned paid leave in your policy, and you have unlimited PTO that you allow employees to accrue, all of it is potentially going to apply to earned paid leave. So that's should be concerning for employers to seriously think about creating an earned paid leave policy and consulting with either lawyers or HR professionals as to how to establish that. And even asking my office, giving me a call to say, this is what we're putting into policy. Do you see any conflict with the law and how we interpret it with what we're putting in place for the policy? And just having that conversation. And next slide. Yeah, aligning your policies with the laws, making sure that what you're offering employees meets the minimum that the statute offers. If you offer more than the minimum, just know that when it comes to rollover and accrual amounts, it could be a liability. Therefore, employers, when you have employees, not every employee is going to be the type that as soon as they earn time, they use it. There's employees that bank it year after year and rarely take time off. That could be a potential liability if you don't specify what happens to that balance at the time of separation. Training your managers to know what the law requires so that when their staff request time off and they specify, an employee has to let employers know that the time they're taking off, they want to use their earned paid leave for that time. And when they do that, the staff, the managers should know what you, the employer, require, what the statute requires, and that they are in alignment and that employees do actually have access to that leave. Every year, the legislature comes into session and laws are added, amended, rescinded, repealed. Keeping track or keeping your ear to the news and monitoring updates that we put out on law changes, just paying attention to what's happening in the legislature and HR organizations that keep track to know if your policies need to be updated because of these changes.
Yeah, and can I add, just because the base rate of pay is so complicated, you want to make sure that the people who are in charge of calculating that know exactly what they're doing, because they can inadvertently make a mistake quite easily. So you want to make sure they have proper training on that issue.
Absolutely. If somebody were to make a complaint to my office saying, look, I was paid or unpaid leave, but the employer did not make the right calculation, they based it on A instead of A, B, and C, we would have a conversation with the employer to see what happened. And if there was an issue where the employee is actually owed the difference of what they were paid and what they should have been paid, we'll encourage the employer to make that payment. Ultimately, if they were to refuse or we had to take some stronger enforcement action, the employee could be entitled to up the amount that was owed plus twice that amount and interest as liquidated damages. So it could be costly. That type of enforcement action is our last resort. We don't jump right to penalizing employers. We want to educate them and get them to come into compliance and understand what their requirements are, rather than be the strong arm of the law, so to speak.
Okay, so I think we better move on to PFML because it's because it's a complicated topic.
Hi there. Thank you so much. My name's Sarah Brydon. I'm the Claims Administration Division Director with the Bureau of Paid Family and Medical Leave at the Maine Department of Labor. I'm so excited to talk to everybody. I am going to apologize in advance for talking pretty quickly. You can move along to the next slide. There's so much to say, and I'm so glad to be with all of you today. At a super high level, we're going to talk about some of the basics of the Maine Paid Family and Medical Leave program, who's covered, what leave reasons are covered, how much time people can take. Also talk about AFLAC, which is the company that the Maine Department of Labor selected to administer these claims on behalf of the Maine PFML Bureau. So that's a key distinction. The EPL conversation was very centered on what employers have to do and all these specifics and all that detail. Certainly, employers need to understand Maine PFML, but for employers that are participating in the public plan, AFLAC does all that administrative work on behalf of the Bureau. There's a little bit of conversation about unique aspects of our Maine Paid Family and Medical Leave program that are a little bit different for folks that might be familiar with paid leave programs in other states. And then hopefully we'll have a few minutes for questions. Can you go to the next slide? Thanks. And then one more, that'd be great. Also, just super quickly, if you take nothing else from what I'm saying, one of the most important things that I want to convey is maine.gov/paid leave is the Maine PFML program's website. There's so much information there. There's FAQs, there's explainer videos, there are other webinars that have been recorded that are Maine PFML centric and have a lot of information for various audiences. But I am going to go through these slides at a pretty good pace. So first up, who can take Maine Paid Family and Medical Leave? And one of the key components of this slide that I want to make sure I get across is that our program casts a really wide net. So you heard in the EPL conversation, the floor of 10 employees, our program does not have that. So there's no minimum employer size. It's a portable benefit. So there is, in terms of getting paid benefits, there's no length of service requirement. It's really about whether a worker has earned a sufficient amount in Maine employment generally, not just one particular company, but whether that person has met the program's earnings requirements over their base period. In order to apply for and be approved for and get benefits under Maine PFML, The worker also has to be out for a specifically covered reason. They have to provide documentation that's connected to that covered reason, and they have to have time left to use. So it's not in any stretch of the imagination an unlimited amount of time. There's a couple of areas where coverage is elective. So if a tribal government in Maine is an employer, they can choose whether they want to participate and have their employees covered. And then also self-employed individuals can elect coverage, can opt in, can choose to participate and get coverage. And then there's a handful of exceptions that are carve-outs. So similar to the EPL program, federal government employees are not part of our program. Federal work study incarcerated workers, there's a handful of carve-outs. Could you go to the next slide, please? Okay. So again, how much time can an employee be approved for? It's up to 12 weeks of leave. Not everybody who files a claim for Maine PFML is going to take all 12 weeks, but that's the maximum in their benefit year, which is a 12-month period. It does not have to be taken all at once. It can be taken continuously in blocks of time. It can be taken intermittently, which for folks that are familiar with federal or Maine FMLA is probably a term that's pretty familiar. It often does and is designed to run concurrently with federal and Maine FMLA as often as possible. Our program specifically has a provision that other state programs don't have, which we have been referring to as an anti-stacking provision. So when an employee applies for Maine PFML, one of the things that AFLAC on our behalf is going to look at is whether that employee took Maine or federal FMLA by itself without Maine PFML basically in the year leading up to the start of their requested Maine PFML. If so, that amount of time gets taken away from their available 12 weeks of Maine PFML. So again, that's intended to cut down on the number of times and scenarios where somebody might otherwise say, oh, I'm going to take my federal FMLA and then save my PFML to take as a separate chunk of time. So the vision and the intent is to not allow that to happen. Next slide, please. Thanks. Okay. So again, Maine Paid Family and Medical Leave is for very specific reasons. Many of these, again, for folks that have been dealing with federal and Maine FMLA, a lot of these will be very familiar. So again, I'm going to talk very quickly and just skate on past this slide at a pretty good pace. So, bonding with a new child, caring for a family member with a serious health condition, military family leave. If you are familiar with federal FMLA, that's qualifying exigency leave. So if a worker's family member is in the military and is being deployed, the worker then might need to make arrangements and deal with some things related to that. Medical leave. So when the worker themselves has a serious health condition. One thing that is a little bit different from a lot of the existing leave of absence universe that's already in place and is not always considered one of the classic leave reasons, safe leave. So Maine Paid Family and Medical Leave includes safe leave as a covered leave reason. And so that is when a worker or their family member is dealing with a situation of abuse or violence and needs time away from work to seek safety. Next slide, please. All right, so like I mentioned, AFLAC is the administrator that the Department of Labor selected to do all of this administrative work on our behalf and support the workers of Maine for the public plan. So again, maine.gov/paid leave. It's a wonderful website, and among the things you can find there are the hyperlink to get into the AFLAC portal. So employees, workers can go through that to get into the AFLAC portal and set up a claim. AFLAC also has a call center, and the number is also available on our website. One key part of this slide that I want to take a beat and spend some time on is the expectation also that employees are in conversation with their employers. So the idea here is not for employers to be surprised. Oh my gosh, this person set up a Maine PFML application with AFLAC and this is the first I'm hearing of it. That's not the intent at all. Employees are expected to let employers know that they'll need to be out. 30 days is reasonable for foreseeable leave. Obviously, life throws curveballs sometimes. So if leave is not foreseeable, then the expectation is, as soon as feasible. And it's contemplated to be written notice, which could be an email or a text. But letting the employer know leave reason, timing of leave, all those things. Next slide, please. Super. Okay. So AFLAC's going to take in that claim application and first ask whether the person is eligible. Again, that is an earnings question. So I'm not going to go through all the intricacies of this. Certainly, if you want to learn more, again, maine.gov/paid leave, tons of information and explanations of these concepts in various ways. But AFLAC's going to take a look at the available wage data that we have on file and send over to them and ask the question, is the person eligible? Next slide, please. Then AFLAC, assuming the person is eligible, AFLAC is going to ask, okay, so has this person provided documentation to support why they are requesting paid leave from work? And very intuitively, each of the leave reasons is going to have a specific documentation requirement that's tethered and logically linked up with the leave reason. Next slide, please. So assuming the person's eligible and they've sent in certification information to support why they are asking to be out of work, the next thing AFLAC is going to do is they're going to calculate the person's benefit. So again, AFLAC is going to use the wage data that is available to them and run all that information through a relatively complex equation. It's a tiered benefit equation. So lower wage earners will end up getting their wages replaced at a higher rate, a slightly higher rate than higher wage earners. But in every case, the weekly benefit amount that AFLAC is going to calculate is capped at a maximum weekly benefit amount. And that is equal to the state average weekly wage, which is the number that gets published every year. Next slide, please. Okay, so for an employer that has an employee who has applied for Maine Paid Family and Medical Leave with AFLAC, it's really important to know that the best way to interact with AFLAC, to the extent that interaction is necessary, obviously AFLAC's carrying the burden of the administrative work, but employers do need to be aware and understand the process. AFLAC's employer portal is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And so the way that you get into the AFLAC portal is by logging in to the existing, so the contributions portal available at maine.gov/paid leave, the contributions portal that has been up and running since January of 2025. You log into that and there's a hyperlink into the AFLAC employer portal, same credentials. We wanted to make it as easy as possible for employers to navigate this as sort of a universe of information versus having a whole bunch of different logins and passwords and all that. So it's really important to make sure that within your company's organization, you have Maine Paid Leave Contributions Portal access to the members of your team that need to get into that portal and the AFLAC employer portal as well. Within the Maine Paid Leave Contributions portal, you can indicate your claim contact for AFLAC purposes. That's where they will send all of their emails to you. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is just a screenshot of what I'm talking about in terms of getting into the contributions portal and then navigating over to the AFLAC portal. Next slide, please. And also another plug for maine.gov/paid leave. All of these materials are there as well. So you can go through and look at them, slide by slide as you see fit. So this is just a quick indicator of what it's going to look like in the AFLAC portal when you get there. And that's where you would go to interact in terms of an employment verification form to give AFLAC what they need for information to review an application and land on an accurate result. Next slide, please. One more, please. Thanks. Okay. So again, Maine employment verification is the form that's most important in these contexts. The employer wage verification form is usually not going to be required, assuming that you as an employer have been submitting wage reports and all of the information that's needed on a quarterly basis. AFLAC will have all that data, and they hopefully will not need to get an employer wage verification form for you. Undue hardship is only needed if you are going to pursue the undue hardship process, which if you have seen other webinars or discussions about this, you will already know that that is a rescheduling of leave, not a preventing or declining of leave. But that's something that is available as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so the Maine employment verification form is the most important one. So that's the opportunity for an employer to let AFLAC know things like, I mentioned the anti-stacking provision of our program. If federal or Maine FMLA time has been used by the worker in the previous 12 months by itself without Maine PFML, that's how you would let AFLAC know about that, so they can make that adjustment. If somebody creates a Maine PFML claim and they actually have a date of separation from employment with your company, make sure you let AFLAC know that using this form as well. If the employee has indicated a work schedule that's not accurate, that would go on the form as well. And then also if you provide full wage replacement, so a lot of companies do 100% paid parental leaves, things like that, or workers' compensation, there's a section of the form where you would indicate that for AFLAC as well. You don't have to complete this form. After 10 days, if they don't have it, they will move forward with the information they have available. But it is a part of the process that allows employers to communicate with AFLAC and give them important information. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I believe we are at the part of the presentation where Ellen is going to step in.
Yes, thank you, Sarah, so much. And that was great information. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what makes Maine unique, because many of you have employees in other jurisdictions where you're already used to providing or complying with the paid family and medical leave programs. Many of you are also covered by FMLA. And so some of these provisions are also a little bit different from FMLA. So we wanted to just kind of go through these quickly. The first thing, which I think is, at least in my experience, is catching a lot of employers off guard, is the way Maine PFML treats non-group health insurance benefit continuation. I want to make sure everyone understands we are not talking about group health insurance here, right? This is non-group health insurance. So we all know under FMLA, under a lot of the PFML programs, and under Maine, we have to continue group health insurance as if the employee hadn't taken leave. That's kind of a bellwether, if you will, of leave administration. But Maine actually takes a different approach to non-group health insurance. So things like vacation, sick leave, bonuses, advancement, seniority benefits, and length of service. Maine takes an approach that is unique from FMLA and every other PFML program. So in Maine, those non-group health benefits have to continue while an employee is on Maine PFML as if they remained at work. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this yet, you want to pay attention to this and make sure you're looking at all of your benefit plans, your bonuses, your pension, anything that's seniority based, because this is different from FMLA and all of the other PFML programs. Sarah mentioned undue hardship quickly, but undue hardship is also unique to Maine. There's no other PFML program that has this. As we know, there's no undue hardship evaluation under FMLA. And I think what's important, as Sarah noted, is if an employee's leave, whether it is the length of the leave, the duration, or the scheduling, creates an undue hardship, an employer has an opportunity to work with the employee to reschedule that leave. But I have to let you know that the healthcare provider has to agree with the rescheduling as well. So work with your employee. They need to work with their healthcare provider. Leave might be able to be rescheduled, but not denied or canceled. The other thing that's really unique to Maine PFML, no other PFML program has done this, is that there is the ability to deduct either FMLA or Maine FMLA that was taken prior to the time an employee was able to receive Maine PFML benefits from their current Maine PFML entitlement. So some other programs allow this while the program has been live, or while the employee can file for benefits, such as Massachusetts, if you're used to that. But this is actually going to reach back the 12 months before, at least in theory, the 12 months before an employee could even take Maine PFML benefits. Partial days are a little bit unique in Maine as well. So if the employer and employee agree, the employee can take Maine PFML in less than full day increments, as long as that increment is at least 1 hour. And this is for pay as well. And so typically, employee takes Maine PFML in a full workday increment, but if there's agreement, they can take it in less than a full workday. Some other states allow employer policy to dictate an increment for leave, but the state typically has 1 increment for when benefits will be paid. So this can be a little bit different for Maine as well. The definition of family members, pay close attention to this. It is very broad. There are some other programs that are as broad as far as covering relationships or family-like relationships, grandparents, grandchildren, siblings. But Maine's definition covers not only those relationships for the employee, but those relationships for the employee's spouse or domestic partner. So think of siblings-in-law, grandparents-in-law. So you want to make sure you understand how broad that definition is. Maine also uses a third-party administrator in AFLAC. Connecticut is the only other program that does that. So all of the other PFML programs, either the state runs it, you can have private plans, but Maine and Connecticut are the only 2 that use a third-party administrator. When it comes to an employer receiving unemployment or workers' comp, when they also apply for PFML, in Maine, there are going to be offsets from benefits, not disqualifiers. So many of you are used to other PFML programs where if an employee is receiving workers' comp, they might actually be disqualified from participating in the PFML program. And in Maine, it would be an offset. And then finally, private plans are a little bit unique in Maine. So a private plan absolutely has to provide equivalent benefits to the state program in order to be approved. But equivalent is defined a little bit differently in Maine than in other programs. So just one example is a private plan in Maine can offer only 10 weeks of benefits instead of 12, but the monetary equivalent of that benefit has to equal a full 12 weeks of benefits. Some of the other differences for private plans is they can use a different look back period for wages. They can do a different benefit year. So there are some other unique attributes of private plans in Maine. If you're interested in a private plan, you want to make sure you check out those slight differences in order to be able to go ahead and have your private plan. So I think here we're done with the formal part of the presentation. I want to turn it over to Steve to see if we have a few minutes for questions.
Sure. One question which is timely involves summer camps for PFML. So there was a seasonal exception for EPL, but the question is, what about camp counselors? Do they get paid FML?
It depends, but potential. So there's no exclusion for summer camp counselors, and I think that's actually a really important scenario to underscore the portability of benefits. So if a camp counselor has been working in Maine for for more than say 5 calendar quarters, and they have their wage data and their wage information, and they have this whole base period worth of earnings, then they don't need to be working for a particular employer for any set amount of time in order to get Maine paid family and medical leave benefits. There's a 120-day requirement for job protection, but the portability of benefits being paid out is across all Maine employment.
And so, Ellen, maybe a question for you. What should employers do if you've got this potential for a new hire being gone for their entire job?
I think this is something they're going to have to be thinking about when they think about their staffing this summer, probably, for the first time, because obviously these benefits are available for the first time this summer. And I think to Sarah's point, because it is a portable benefit, you may have a counselor who is eligible for PFML. So employers are going to have to take this into account in their staffing plans for the first time.
Okay. A question that came in the chat. This employer they already have 12 weeks of paid FMLA, so they treat that as paid. Can that be combined so the employee gets 24 weeks, or would using FMLA count as well as using the PFML?
Yeah, so it definitely, I mean, there's a lot of follow-up questions there, but I will say that, so first of all, there's the anti-stacking provision. So FMLA used without Maine PFML can and often will reduce the amount of PFML that's available. The other component is that when a worker applies with AFLAC, one of the questions will be, are you getting 100% wage replacement? So do you have a paid company leave? If the answer is yes, then the Maine PFML application will be adjusted so that for example, to use a slightly different scenario, if there's a 4-week 100% paid parental leave, AFLAC's going to start the PFML request after that ends. So if it's 12 weeks of 100% fully paid company leave, then the Maine PFML benefits are not going to be. It's not going to be a double dipping scenario where the person gets both.
Okay, and not to borrow that phrase double dipping, but this has come up before, which is an employee that has multiple jobs. And so how does that work? And do you take leave from all jobs or benefits prorated or reduced? Like, how's that work?
Yeah, again, it depends. So let's assume somebody has 2 jobs and both employers are participating in the public plan. AFLAC is going to specifically ask, which employers are you taking leave from? If the person says, I'm having surgery, I cannot do anything, I'm taking leave from both employers, then what they will do is they will gather information about the person's work schedule at both employers and do their analysis in the aggregate. If, for example, somebody worked 20 hours at job A and 20 hours at job B and said, I only need leave from job A, then what would end up happening is the claim would be a claim for half of each week at a very 30-second level answer.
Okay. And this may more involve AFLAC, but we'll see if Sarah or Ellen, you could answer. When an employee has a request for leave, let's say to care for someone who's not a family member, but would fall under that definition of like a family member, what do they have to do, if anything, to prove that?
Yeah, there's a form that specifically gets added to the claim requirements when that is the indicated answer. So when somebody says, I need leave from work to care for a family member, the person that I need leave to care for is somebody that I have a significant personal bond with. There's an attestation form that directs the worker to explain, what is it? It's a totality of circumstances sort of review in terms of what the features are of that person's relationship with the other person and why they are indicating that would qualify, and then AFLAC will review it.
Okay. Another sort of timely question. Summer break for school teachers. I don't know, Ellen or Sarah, if you want to talk about what's the impact, right? So can teachers take 12 weeks of PFML for the summer break?
It depends on so many different variables. It's not, there's a lot of different things that could be true in that fact pattern, and it's not something that I think we can get into in the next 30 seconds, unfortunately.
Okay. Does it matter how a teacher is paid? So if they're only paid during the school year, or if they're paid on a 12, throughout the 12 months, does that change things?
It depends. I mean, the other piece of what I think the other piece of what is happening at this point is that, we've gone through the implementation process, and now AFLAC is actually taking claims and going through specific scenarios with all of their different, variables and fact patterns. And so the Bureau is going to be less and less able to answer specific hypotheticals. But I think that applying for leave and then working with AFLAC is the best case for a lot of these situations.
Okay. Ellen, is top up allowed?
Yeah, so my opinion is that the statute and the regulations do not address top up at all. The Bureau did put out some guidance, but I read it to still allow top up by virtue of employer policy. So it's my opinion that if an employer policy doesn't allow top up, that it is not required in Maine, under Maine PFML.
Okay. Another question that came in involves the employee count. Does EPL and PFML use the same definition for counting who's an employee to get over the 10 employee threshold in EPL, and then just for PFML, I guess, if they're a Maine employee?
I can jump in on this one. If so I think Scott and Mindy went over how you define it under EPL, but under Maine PFML, it uses a unique formula. You look on October 1 of every year and you look back to see how many Maine-based employees you had for at least 20 weeks in the preceding 12-month period. And then your employee count is locked in for the next year. And so it's 20 weeks period. It's over the last 12 months. But Maine is a little bit unique in that you lock it in on October 1st for the next year, which gives you some continuity and some reliability, which is good. But it is a little bit of a unique way of looking at it. And this, again, reminder to people, Maine employers are covered if you have just one employee in Maine. This is for whether the employer has to give contributions. So that's what you're looking at the employee count for under Maine PFML.
Okay. Sort of higher level, and maybe for Mindy or Ellen, since you're advising employers, what should employers do to try to comply with all of this? Like, my head hurts hearing all of this. I mean, how do you operate with all of this?
Yeah, I think one of the things, and folks have said this, but I think it's really important in the PFML context as well. My read of the statute is that you don't have to have a Maine PFML policy, but I recommend all of my clients have a PFML policy because you want to understand all of the different components of the law. You want your HR team to be able to refer back to that, but of course you want your employees to know as well. So I think that's really important. Also, make sure you're using those resources that Sarah talked about and keeping up to date. I mean, I subscribe to their email alerts and I get email alerts from them all the time. I go to their webinars as well. So when Sarah's putting on a webinar, I always try to attend, just trying to stay as up to date as you can. And then, of course, making sure you have counsel that can help you navigate this because it can get really complicated. Mindy, I don't know if you had anything else to add to that.
When the DOL does publish its amended rules, I think it's important for employers to weigh in on those with their comments so that they can participate in that process as well.
And we could take like one more question, which again, sort of higher level, maybe we'll go down the line, or sort of what are the most common issues or violations that you're seeing employers have? And maybe Scott, we want to start with you on the EPL side, and we can go down the line.
I think the common problem that gets reported in my office is employers not allowing employees to use earned paid leave, and not aware that they're obligated to allow employees to use leave that they have, in fact, actually accrued.
Yeah, and I've gotten these calls before where it's a third party sort of HR or payroll agency who tells the employer, "Oh no, you don't have to worry about that," or you don't have enough employees and they're using the wrong threshold. So right. I think that's a key thing for folks to know. And I'll put in a plug for the DOL's website. There's a ton of information. It's great. So you go in there, look at the FAQs, look at the bullet points, and that can answer a lot of questions. Ellen, how about on the PFML side?
I think the biggest surprise I hear from my clients is the continuation of non-group health benefits. Most of my employers don't continue to accrue these benefits during leave. It's not a break-in service, as we know, under FMLA. Leave is never a break-in service, but it doesn't have to be continuous service. So most of my clients are very surprised that Maine has a different rule, and it's creating them to recalculate their systems, to look at their pension plans, to look at any seniority-based benefit. So to me, that's been one of the most impactful things, and employers maybe haven't caught up yet to that and haven't been able to fix or change their policies yet to account for Maine's rule.
Sarah?
Yeah, I would say at this point, employers are, I think, getting used to interacting with AFLAC, navigating the portal, calling in with a case number, and speaking with people. It's the middle of June, so we're a month and a half into the program, and I think there's just a little bit of a learning curve, but I'm confident that we will get there.
All right, Mindy, last word.
What I see a problem with is employers lumping everything into one pot and thinking that you can apply all the rules to that one pot, and it becomes really very difficult. So oftentimes it's more it makes a lot more sense to have separate buckets so that you can deal with each one individually rather than trying to deal with everything all at once, because it becomes virtually impossible.
Okay. All right. Well, we've gone over time, but I think it was important to get answers to those questions. So Amanda, do you have last thing to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody. Thank you, the speakers, for joining us today, and thank you everyone who is attending this live webinar. We will be sending out the recording very soon, and this webinar has been approved for HR credits with SHRM and HRCI. So if you attended live, please reach out to get further accreditation info. With that, that is the end of our webinar. Thank you.